You are 6 years old. Your father has not come home. He walked in the door this morning with a fever. By the time the sun went down, he was gone. No warning, no goodbye. Just a chair at the dinner table that nobody sits in anymore. This is where the story of Kentucky Fried Chicken begins. Not in a restaurant, not in a boardroom, in a farmhouse in Henryville, Indiana, in the year 1895, with a boy named Harland David Sanders, who just became the man of the house at 6 years old. His mother had no choice. She had 3 children and no money. She took a job at the tomato cannery, peeling tomatoes 12 hours a day, gone before the children woke up, back after dark. That left Harland with one job: feed his brother and sister, keep the house, keep them alive. And so he did. At age 6, 7, 8, Harland Sanders stood at a stove and figured out how to cook. Not because someone taught him, because no one else was going to. By the time he was 7 years old, he could bake bread from scratch. He could cook vegetables. He was learning meat. The children foraged for food on the land when the cupboards ran dry. And through all of this, Harland Sanders never once complained about his life. He just cooked. That detail matters because 40 years later, when the whole world was rejecting him, he would go back to the one thing that had never let him down. His mother remarried in 1902, a man named William Broadus. Harland was 12. The relationship was bad from the first day. By 13, things had broken down completely, and Harland Sanders left home. No safety net, no plan. 13 years old, alone in Indiana, with nothing but his hands and his hunger. He took a job painting horse carriages in Indianapolis, then farmhand work in southern Indiana. Then he faked his age and joined the United States Army at 16. He spent time in Cuba, came back honorably discharged, tried the railroad, got fired for fighting with a coworker, tried law, ruined his legal career by getting into another fight, tried insurance sales, got fired, tried running a ferry company on the river, failed, tried manufacturing acetylene lamps, failed, tried operating gas stations, closed down by the Great Depression. This is not a man who was lazy. This is not a man who lacked ambition. This is a man that life kept hitting and who kept getting up, not because he was fearless, but because he had nowhere else to go. There's a version of Harland Sanders that we never talk about, the one who was in his 30s, still failing, still moving from job to job, still trying to build something that kept collapsing. Most people would have stopped. Most people would have called it fate. Harland called it Thursday and got back to work. In 1930, Harland Sanders was 40 years old. He had a Shell service station in Corbin, Kentucky, but Corbin sat on Highway 25, one of the main roads that ran north to south through the American South. Truckers, travelers, families on long drives, they all came through Corbin, and they were all hungry. Sanders had no restaurant. He had no dining room. He had a table in his own living quarters at the back of the service station. And he started cooking for them the same way he had cooked for his siblings 30 years before, from scratch, with care, the chicken especially. People would pull off the highway just to eat at Sanders' table. Word spread the way it spreads in small towns, mouth to ear, mile by mile. The governor of Kentucky, Ruby LaFoon, heard about this man in Corbin who was cooking the finest chicken in the state. In 1935, he commissioned Harland Sanders as an honorary Kentucky colonel. That is where the title came from, not the military, not a rank. A governor recognizing a man who could make a piece of chicken taste like it was cooked by someone who genuinely loved you. Sanders expanded. He moved across the street into a proper restaurant, 142 seats, a motel attached, another restaurant in North Carolina, a furniture store, a plumbing supply store. In 1939, a food writer named Duncan Hines published his guidebook, Adventures in Good Eating. He described the Sanders Court and Cafe as one of the best places to eat in America. Sanders was 50 years old. He had finally built something real, something that was working. And then Thanksgiving arrived, November 1939. The restaurant burned to the ground, everything gone. A lesser man would have seen the sign, would have taken the ash and the rubble and called it the universe, telling him to stop. Harland Sanders looked at the ruins of his restaurant and started rebuilding. He made it bigger this time. He introduced something new, a pressure fryer. A new technology that cooked chicken faster than a pan and locked in the moisture and the flavor in a way nobody had achieved before. He experimented for months. He adjusted the spices. He tried combinations. He threw batches away. He tried again. By the summer of 1940, Harland Sanders had it. The recipe, 11 herbs and spices, a pressure frying method he would later patent, a taste that he was certain the world was not ready for. He was right, but not in the way he imagined. World War II arrived. The government rationed petrol. Travelers stopped traveling. Sanders had to close the motel. When the war ended, he reopened. Business came back. By 1953, the restaurant and motel were valued at $165,000. Sanders was in his 60s. He had fought through a dead father, a broken home, a decade of failed careers, a fire, a world war, and had come out the other side with something genuinely valuable. He rejected an offer of $164,000 for the business in 1953. He thought it was worth more than that. He was right. He was also about to lose everything again. The federal government announced a new interstate highway, US 25, rerouted 7 miles to the west of Corbin. The road that carried 10 years of customers past Sanders' front door was being redirected. Overnight, the traffic vanished. The travelers who had kept the restaurant alive were now driving 7 miles away on a faster road. They were not coming back. Sanders watched his business collapse the way you watch a tide go out. Slowly, then completely. He sold everything at auction. The restaurant, the motel, all of it. He paid off his debts. When the accounting was done, Harland David Sanders was 65 years old with essentially nothing left. The government sent him his first Social Security check, $105. That was it. That was the whole picture. A 65-year-old man, decades of work, $105. Most people would have sat down. Most people would have called the children, would have moved to a spare room somewhere and told the grandkids about the old restaurant and let the years go quiet. Harland Sanders packed his 1946 Ford. He loaded it with a pressure cooker and bags of his spice blend, and he drove. This is the part of the story that does not get told enough, because what happened next was not glamorous. It was not a big break. It was not an investor meeting or a television deal. It was a 65-year-old man driving the back roads of America, knocking on restaurant doors. He would walk in, introduce himself, ask if he could cook a meal for the owner, right there in their kitchen. If they liked it, the deal was simple. 4 cents for every chicken Sanders' recipe sold. That was it. No upfront cost, no franchise fee, just 4 cents. And the answer over and over was no, no, not interested. We have our own menu. We don't need this. No. He slept in his car, on cold nights in the back seat, parked outside towns he did not know, driving to the next door in the morning. He was 65. He was 66. He was 67. Still driving, still knocking, still cooking chicken for strangers who mostly said no. The number of rejections Harland Sanders received before someone said yes was 1,009. 1,009. Not 100. Not 500. 1,009. And 9. Every single one of those rejections required him to get back in the car, to reset, to believe that the next door would be different, that the chicken was good enough, that he was not wrong. Think about what that takes. Not talent, not luck, not intelligence, just a refusal to let the number grow bigger than the belief. In 1952, a few years before the highway rerouted, Sanders had attended a restaurant convention in Chicago. He met a man named Pete Harmon. Pete ran a chain of restaurants in Salt Lake City, Utah. They stayed in contact. When Sanders started driving and knocking, Pete Harmon was one of the first calls. Sanders drove to Salt Lake City. He cooked dinner for Pete and his wife. Chicken, mashed potatoes, biscuits, gravy. Pete Harmon said yes, not just yes to adding it to the menu. He believed in it enough to put it on the restaurant window. He hired a sign painter named Don Anderson, and Don Anderson coined 3 words that would eventually be printed on over 27,000 buildings across the world: Kentucky Fried Chicken. Pete Harmon did not just become the first franchisee. He gave the brand its name. He introduced the bucket in 1957. 15 pieces of chicken, gravy, and biscuits. A meal that a family could carry home. The bucket became iconic before anyone knew what iconic meant. Sanders' recipe tripled the sales of Harmon's restaurants. Word spread to other owners. The 4 cents per chicken deal started making real money for the first time. By 1964, Harland Sanders was 73 years old. There were over 600 KFC franchises operating across the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Mexico, and Australia. Friends and family had been urging him for months to sell. He was worried. Not about the money, about the chicken. He had spent his entire life making sure it tasted right. He did not trust strangers to care the way he cared. Eventually, he agreed. On January 6, 1964, he closed the deal, $2 million, plus a lifetime salary of $40,000 a year, later raised to $75,000. He kept the rights to the Canadian operations. He turned those profits over to charities, churches, hospitals, the Boy Scouts, the Salvation Army. He adopted 78 foreign orphans. He had come from nothing, and he spent the rest of his life making sure others had something. But here is what people miss about that sale. Sanders did not retire. He did not buy a boat. He did not sit on a porch. He put his white suit on, and he kept going. After 1949, when he received his second honorary Kentucky Colonel commission, Sanders had done something deliberate. He decided to become the character. He grew the goatee. He started wearing the string tie. He bleached his mustache and goatee white to match his hair. He chose the white suit because it hid the flour stains from cooking, and he never took it off in public again. Not once. For the rest of his life, every television appearance, every restaurant visit, every handshake, white suit, black string tie, silver hair, silver goatee. He had turned himself into a brand before anyone called it personal branding. He understood that the Colonel was not just a man. The Colonel was a promise that the chicken inside was going to taste exactly like someone's grandmother made it. After the sale, when Hoopland Incorporated bought KFC in 1971 and started changing things, the gravy recipe, the cooking methods, the quality standards, Sanders did not stay quiet. He called the new gravy slop. He sued the company for over $1 million because they were using his image to sell products he had not approved. He won. He remained the face of KFC until the final weeks of his life. In June 1980, at the age of 89, he was diagnosed with acute leukemia. He kept working. He kept traveling. He kept wearing the suit. On December 16, 1980, Harland Sanders died in Louisville, Kentucky. He was 90 years old. At the time of his death, there were 6,000 KFC locations in 48 countries. He was buried at Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, in his white suit and his black string tie. Here's what the history books call this story: a success story, an entrepreneurship case study, a late bloomer. But that is not what it is. This is the story of a 6-year-old boy standing at a stove because no one else was going to feed his siblings. And that boy never stopped. He did not stop when his father died. He did not stop when his stepfather threw him out. He did not stop when the railroad fired him, when the law career collapsed, when the ferry company failed, when the Great Depression took the gas station, when the restaurant burned on Thanksgiving, when the highway moved, when 1,000 people said no. He did not stop, not because he was fearless, not because he had a plan, not because someone believed in him. He did not stop because he had already survived the worst thing. The worst thing had already happened before he was old enough to understand it. And he had learned at 6 years old that you do not wait for someone to come and fix it. You go to the stove, you figure it out, you feed the people who are depending on you. That is all Kentucky Fried Chicken is. A recipe from a boy who had to learn to cook so his brother and sister would not go hungry, carried for 60 years, rejected 1,000 times, and still cooking. The question is not whether you have what it takes. The question is whether you are willing to stay in the car one more night, drive to one more door, knock one more time, after 1,000 no's, after the fire, after the highway moves, after the check arrives and it says $105, and that is everything you have. Harland Sanders did not build Kentucky Fried Chicken. He became it. He became it because he had no other choice. And then, when he finally had a choice, he chose it anyway, every single day, in a white suit, until the day he died. The chicken is not the story, the man is the story, and the man is still out there, somewhere in the logo, looking at you, asking one quiet question: what are you willing to carry, and how long are you willing to carry it?